Right, I'm going live now.
Okay, the time is 1:02. The chair calls to order the May 24th meeting of the Kansas Governmental Ethics Commission. Thank you, commissioners and staff, for your attendance today. In your materials, you have today's agenda and the minutes from our prior meeting on March 22nd. Can anyone identify any corrections that need to be made to either the minutes or the agenda as written? If there are none, I'll take a motion to approve.
This is Patty, so moved.
Thank you, Patty. Do I have a second? Jane?
Second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the motion to approve the minutes and agenda as written signify. Excuse me, Chris, you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just getting ready to say aye.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Turning to the agenda, we'll begin with Executive Director Skoglund's report.
Sure. The only thing we have today is a statement of substantial interest update. I'm going to share a screen real quick for you so you have the most updated information. You should be able to see it now. This is the current SSIs that are filed and outstanding. The current compliance rate is something like 97.1%, which is great. These are typically pretty difficult to get some people to file just because it is something that so many different types of people need to file. So there's 5,909 total people who have to file a statement of substantial interest this year. And thanks to the tireless efforts of Roxy, 5,740 of them already have. Most of the people who are still outstanding are people who are state employees with the universities. This is typically where we see the most people that delay their statement of substantial interest filing for a variety of reasons that are not necessarily unique to them. It's in part just because there's a lot of employees there, and partly because there's some these requests get passed through a number of other people in the process. So you have that list there. You'll see most of the outstanding reports, just like I indicated, are really just state employees that are designees. They're people essentially who have policymaking roles in their agency who end up filing. So there are some board members that are outstanding, a few grain commissioners, and one general counsel that's outstanding. But this is how it's all broken down. Every single elected official has properly filed their SSI at this point, which is great. We have not sent failure to files on these. If we sent 169 failure to files, it would cost us $1,250. And typically it's our experience that compliance on future SSIs goes up as long as we continue to work with them in the short term. So we're hoping to continue this effort. And I know Roxy has worked pretty hard on getting these numbers to this point. I'm sure these last 169 people, she's already been working very hard on as well. So any questions about the SSI update? That's all I have today.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciated. Turning back to the agenda, we have some civil penalties to run through. Do you want to take us through those, Mark?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with, there's only not a lot of candidates. We have one for Marcus Clark, a candidate for Topeka City Council for $300. Elton Hale owed us an amended October report for the Kansas Black Republican Council, hit the maximum $300. Mackenzie Haddix for Kansans for Life is a lobbyist. These are the lobbyist ones for $100. Eugene Bradley for the National Guard of Kansas for $1,000. Mary Ellen Conley for Episcopal Social Services for $250. Rachel McGinnis Millsap for Casey Healthy Kids for $1,000. Daniel Shafton for Cannabis Chamber of Commerce for $1,000. Jacob Hamlin for CHS for $100, and Robert L. Wood for $150. I believe that's all we actually have this time. We don't have a ton that are currently out there. Most of them around this time of year are lobbyists because that's really the people who are owing reports during the year. So I can take any questions. Otherwise, there's no motion that we need to take. That's it's just providing notice to the commission that those are late.
Any questions? Moving on, we have 9 civil penalty waiver requests to go through, beginning with Janelle Barton.
Yes, with
Mr.
the
Chairman,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, before we start, I looked at this and I asked Mark to send me or Jessica, whoever sent it, just what goes out to these lobbyists when they do sign up, because we have a lot of I didn't know in this thing, and the email from Jessica is very clear on when their first report is due and every report thereafter. So I just think we should be cognizant of that as we consider these waiver requests.
That's fair, Jane. Thank you. Appreciate the comment. Do you want to take us through this one, Mark?
Yep, with permission, I'd actually like to jump down to Mackenzie Haddix. I believe that her represented counsel is present, and out of consideration for their time, I generally like to skip to people who are physically present first, as long as they're okay with it. I didn't know if Ms. Haddix was also appearing. So she is. I will take you through very quickly the top line layer of it, and then I'll pass it over with the chair's permission to Mr. Nye. Any objection to moving to her now? I didn't know if she was appearing or not, Josh.
She's not.
Okay. There's real quick. This is a lobbyist who was 1 day late for $100. It's her first offense. This is her. She indicated in the letter she's a first-time lobbyist. She didn't know about the report. Her office received the failure to file, but didn't send it to her until a few days later after the civil penalty had started. She filed, I think, zeros. There weren't any, I don't believe there were any expenditures that were there. Typically, these are categories we usually think are pretty positive, that this is someone who, they're new, they didn't have any expenditures, so there's not a transparency concern as much here. And it was 1 day late. The one factor I would note is that the lobbyist desk had not heard from her, I don't believe, though she did actually obviously file just 1 day late. So I cautiously support this waiver. I don't really have a problem with it at all. It's $100, again, 1 day late for a first-time lobbyist, but I'll pass it off to Mr. Nye.
I don't have anything to add other than that I think she's very aware of her responsibilities under the code and intends to file on time in the future.
Yep, I think that's the case.
Do any commissioners wish to make a motion?
I'd move that we waive it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, John. Do any commissioners wish to second that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Andrew. Any additional discussion? If not, we'll take a vote on the motion. All in favor of approving the waiver signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed say nay. The motion passes. Thank you. Do you want to return to the first one, Mark?
There's one other person who indicated she might be in person. Paige, is Ms. Herbert present in the room?
No, she's not.
Okay, we'll just do them in order then and get to her when we get to her in case she does decide that she wants to appear. So the first one is Janelle Barton. This is a treasurer for the Pawnee County Central Committee. She was assessed $300, the maximum. This is her first offense. She actually was newly elected. This is her first time and her first report that she ever would have had due. This is our office emailed the chair on January 19th. The chair responded with the treasurer's email. We emailed the treasurer, that's Ms. Barton. We sent the failure to file to her certified. That came back. We then sent the failure to file through first class mail pursuant to normal service process. That did not come back. The civil penalty assessment letter went to the same address and it appears to have caused them to file in March. These central committees are sometimes run by people who are just people that they could recruit, essentially. We don't know their experience. This is a first-time filer. I'm fine with at least a partial waiver here, just because this is someone who, this is their first report ever that they would have ever had to report. I am not thrilled about how the mail issue occurred, that I believe that they had notice of the failure to file back in January and just didn't file it until March. But I'm fine with some grace here and giving a partial waiver.
Thanks for the background. Do any commissioners wish to make a motion, a full waiver, a partial waiver, a conditional waiver of any kind?
Question first.
Sure.
Mark, why do you suspect that the person had knowledge?
Based on normal service process, we sent it through first. So after the certified mail was returned, we sent it through first class mail. That did not get returned. So that would be typical. I mean, obviously that'd be adequate process for any, if we had filed a complaint or something like that. But notably as well, when we assessed the civil penalty in March, we sent that assessment to that address, to the same address. And it looks like, based on timing of when the report was filed, the report was filed right after that. So it appears that that may have triggered them to file the report at that time.
Thank you.
Do any commissioners wish to make a motion? Or do any commissioners have any questions for Mark? If not, we will move on. The next request comes from a Ward Cassidy.
Ward Cassidy is a lobbyist. He was 1 day late for $100. This is his first offense. He is a new registrant. He filed zeros. He didn't make any expenditures. He won't register in the future. I don't believe he probably will have to, based on my understanding of his activity. I think he is aware of the deadlines, and I don't anticipate that there would be an issue going forward. I would support the waiver.
Are there any questions? Do any commissioners wish to make a motion?
Again, I'm not buying that he had no idea about the deadlines, because I've looked at the email that he got.
Okay.
Somebody's got a lot of background noise.
Do we know where that's coming from?
Paige, it looks like it's coming from your end. Do you want to mute when someone's not talking in your room? Just because we normally wouldn't mute the owl, but there's only a couple of you in the room there.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item on the list is, or the next request comes from a Mary Ellen Conley.
I just want to make sure there wasn't a motion for Mr. Cassidy. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, the next one is Mary Ellen Conley. She is a lobbyist who was assessed $250. She did previously receive a $1,400 waiver in 2018, but that was a medical waiver. We typically are very understanding of medical conditions. She's been a lobbyist for a while, and we haven't had any other civil penalties. She registered with the wrong phone number and was out of town when the failure to file was delivered, but there was low activity. This is one of those awkward situations that occasionally happens with lobbyists, where they register near the end of the month. I think she registered with 3 days left in the month. So she owed a report for that month. So if you file 3 days before the end of February, you were a lobbyist in February, and you will owe a report detailing your activity in February, even though it probably will not be very much. That's what happened here. So she is a longtime lobbyist with no real issues previously. I would support the waiver. It's $250.
Do any commissioners have questions? Do any commissioners wish to make a motion?
Well, I move that we waive it as long as she pays 125 within 30 days.
So you would waive 125, you would cut it in half if paid within 30 days.
That's right.
Okay. Any questions? Do any commissioners wish to second that motion?
If anybody should know the rules about lobbying, it's Mary Ellen Conley.
We have a motion. We do not have it seconded. We will move on. All right. The next item on the next request comes from a Tiffany Havener.
Yep, we'll skip Ms. Haddock's because we've already addressed her. So yeah, Tiffany Havener is next. She was the treasurer of the Geary County Central Committee, and this one, I don't anticipate that there'll be a lot of disagreement on this, but I think this situation is worth telling you about. This is her. So she was the treasurer for approximately 12 hours. It is unclear why she was only the treasurer for that period of time, but it is very clear. She sent an email internally resigning on November 22nd at 8:30 a.m. On the same day, November 22nd, the organization sent it through the mail an appointment of treasurer, appointing her as treasurer, and never sent a new one. Now, she didn't send the resignation to us, which is theoretically what she's supposed to do, and there are some instances where this is frustrating, but I mean, she was the treasurer for 12 hours. Technically, she is the only person that we can hold because she was the treasurer at the time. This is her first time, first report, $300. She was not, in actuality, the treasurer for any serious period of time. So I would support this waiver.
Do any commissioners have questions? Do any commissioners wish to make a motion?
This is Patty. I'll move to waive the assessment.
Thank you, Patty. Do any commissioners wish to second that motion or have any additional questions?
Second.
I'll second the motion.
We have Andrew having seconded Commissioner Harrison. So are there any additional questions, any further discussion before we take a vote? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. The next request comes from a Denidre Herbert.
Yep, I am sharing my screen here so you can see, we just got this morning, and you'll see it there. That is the waiver request we received. Once you're done reading it, I'll give you the overview here. She does take responsibility for it in that message. She was transitioning to a new role after the election. Once everyone's had an opportunity to read it, Okay, so this is a lobbyist who was assessed $1,000, which is the maximum. It is her first penalty. She was a lobbyist in the year prior, but I don't believe she was a lobbyist before that. So she's only had a little bit of experience, but she was a lobbyist for a little while. What's a little difficult to me on this one is the contact period. The first report, this is a report that was due on February 10th, and it was ultimately filed on March 10th. Our lobbyist desk emailed on February 13th indicating the report was missing, and she replied, "I'm not lobbying, I'll file an affidavit of exemption." Our lobbyist desk responded and said, "Sounds good, but just be sure to file before noon." We didn't hear from her again. On March 2nd, our lobbyist desk again emailed her. At this point, the civil penalty was at $750, reminding her to file, and we didn't receive a response. On March 8th, our lobbyist desk called. The civil penalty had maxed out, indicating it was still missing. She did file quickly after that. I do think she, frankly, had a lot going on. She was transitioning to a new role. She actually registered in October, which is the earliest you can register for the succeeding year. And I don't know if this problem would have actually occurred if she had just waited to register until December. But she did register, and she owed that report. So I have a hard time one way or the other. I wouldn't say a complete waiver, but I don't have any objection to a partial waiver here. The contact, our lobbyist desk worked very hard to get her to respond, but I also understand that transitions are sometimes difficult, and she has no previous violation with us. This is her first penalty.
And what is the amount at issue?
$1,000, which is the maximum that can be assessed.
Do any commissioners have follow-up questions, or do any commissioners wish to make a motion either for a waiver in whole and part, conditional in any way? The next item on the agenda is a request from a Steve Lopez.
Steve Lopes, yes.
Steve Lopes.
He is the treasurer of the Prairie Roots PAC, which no longer exists. He filed a registration. So there is a Prairie Roots organization that exists, and they created tentatively they registered a PAC. According to Mr. Lopes, and as far as I'm aware, the PAC never actually existed or did anything. They didn't open a bank account. They didn't do anything. So it looks like he registered, was appointed the treasurer, and then did nothing. The organization did not actually exist as a PAC. So this is his first penalty. This actually is the first report he would have owed. They've terminated. They didn't actually do anything, so they filed zeros. I'm fine. I think that this is a good waiver. the organization did not exist, so there's no transparency issue that we're concerned about. And also, I can appreciate that even though he perhaps should have been in contact with us rather than concerned about institutional support from within his organization, I can understand the difficulty that he was going through at the time. So I would support the waiver.
And what is the amount at issue again?
$300, which would be the maximum.
Do any commissioners wish to make a motion, or do any commissioners have follow-up questions for Director Skoglund?
I would move that we waive it. I think based upon the commissioners, upon the executive director's recommendation and the fact that they didn't really exist, it should be waived.
Thank you, John. Do any commissioners wish to second the motion?
This is Patty. I'll second it.
Thank you, Patty. Any additional discussion on the motion to completely waive with respect to Mr. Steve Lopes? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed say nay.
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 2 nays. Kyle, how did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay, so the ayes have it. The motion passes. The next request comes from a Rachel McGinnis Millsap.
Rachel McGinnis Millsap is a lobbyist, was assessed the maximum $1,000. This is her first penalty. We sent the mail to the address on file, like we always do. That office was apparently closed. Everyone was working remotely. She had registered under her personal email, which she had not been checking. That is where we send our contacts there. This is a new registrant. She filed zeros. This is the first report she would have owed. She's indicated she'll start checking her personal email. I don't have a recommendation on this one.
Do any commissioners have questions? Do any commissioners wish to make a motion? The next item on the agenda, the next request is from a Justin Spees.
Yes, Justin Spees is a county candidate. He was assessed the maximum $300. This is his first penalty. Basically, he basically says in the letter that he didn't know he needed a final report if he didn't spend anything. That is not typically a category we consider for a waiver request. I will note that even though he didn't include it in his waiver request, he is a first-time candidate who terminated with zeros in his expenditures. We don't think he wasn't doing any sort of activity. So again, little transparency loss there. But his actual waiver request doesn't fall into a category we typically address. Not knowing you needed a final report would just be, you should read the mail we're sending you. But he did terminate. He had zeros. He didn't make any expenditures, didn't take in any money during that time frame. So I have no recommendation on the item. I don't know. I certainly don't oppose it, but I have no recommendation.
Thank you, Mark. Do any commissioners have follow-up questions for Director Skoglund, or do any commissioners wish to make a motion? Hearing none, I believe that concludes the waiver request portion of the agenda. There are no other items on the agenda. Mark, is there anything else you want to speak to at this time, or no?
No, that's all we've got. Pretty quick meeting. The next one's
Yeah.
going to be longer, but this one was pretty quick.
Okay. Well,
Just,
the next meeting, so go ahead, Commissioner Kroll.
Yes, I'm sorry to interject here. This kind of recalled to my recollection when commissioners Mark, Andrew, and Chris first came on. One of the questions raised was when we were going through, the waiver requests and all was, yikes, where do you all come up with how you put your thumbs on the scale and weigh these? And I think that issue is still out there. I mean, it would be very helpful perhaps if we just sort of had some general sentencing guidelines, so to speak. I mean, I would look to such things as, well, it's a lobbyist, a candidate treasurer. Do they have any prior offenses? That's one filter. experience level, as Mark says, this is their first time, or boy, as Jane said, this person's been at it a long time, different experience levels. Is there a waiver request naturally? Are there health issues, other family issues, and are there logistics issues that were maybe beyond their control, such as with the United States Postal Service and such? And I just having been at this now since August of 2011, it would be very helpful to just kind of have some guidelines rather than almost a gut feel.
Yeah.
It's
Burger
my 2 cents here. Just my 2 cents here at the end of this gathering.
No.
Burger here. I was actually having the same thoughts, and I appreciate you bringing that up again, or bringing it up so we can talk about it perhaps again. But at some point, whether it be a formal sentencing guideline sort of concept, or at least just a continuing conversation among the commissioners at a public meeting about the sort of factors that matter, because as I'm listening to it and I'm trying to remain fresh and new and ignorant, that as I look at these sorts of things, you know, part of me is saying these rules either matter or they don't. And if they really don't matter, then I'm kind of confused as to why we do this at all as far as a waiver. And if they don't matter, then why do we do this at all? So, you know, that's in my mind, again, as an ignorant newbie, that's kind of a fundamental undercurrent to all of this. And if it is just friends and neighbors and I know that person, blah, 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 then it gets more complicated.
I think that the most important thing that we can rely upon is the recommendation of our executive director. We don't have to take his recommendation. We can't blame a bad decision because of his recommendation. We have to take responsibility for those decisions. But I think that he is closer to these things than the rest of us are. And I tend to rely heavily on what our executive director recommends.
I appreciate that, but respectfully, I mean, the whole reason we're here is because we're not Mark. So I like his insight, but it's not especially meaningful to me in my role.
And Chris, I've been singing this tune for a couple of years now. Why are we waiving all these things?
Yeah, we don't have to take Mark's recommendation, but that's the best evidence that we probably have.
Yeah.
And if nobody makes a motion, then the penalty stands. And we can't have the same people making the motion all the time. We need to look at these things and make a decision. And standing mute is making a decision.
Yeah. I'll say for just my own perspective, you know, one of the compelling factors is when there are events that are outside of someone's control that lead to them, you know, making a mistake. But then again, you know, all we really have to go off of is the emails and then the background information we get from Mark. But Kyle, to your point, and Chris, to your point, I think the more structure we have in making these kinds of determinations, to take away just the arbitrary nature, or perhaps even the arbitrary perception of the way that that we come to these conclusions, I think would be helpful. So maybe we could all work toward building a framework that at least identifies those factors that we think deserve some weight in making these kinds of decisions.
If I could speak to that briefly.
Sure.
So I actually agree fundamentally with Commissioner Berger and Commissioner Kroll here. I think that some additional guidance to the approach. At this point, we really discuss the way we talk about them as we try to categorize them by the types of things that we historically have dealt with. But I think it would be helpful to have that discussion. Historically, the commission has resisted having kind of an algorithmic approach, because frankly, we don't do a lot of investigation into these things. If someone emails in and says, I was in the hospital during that time, we're not asking for hospital records, asking to verify that typically. So we, because of that, we try to resist an algorithmic approach to prevent someone from kind of gaming the process. But I do think that Commissioner Kroll's analogy to sentencing guidelines is really effective, that we can have factors that we employ and create a range that the commission can then base that from, and they can depart from that range if there's grounds for departure as well. So what I think would be really helpful at this point is to have an agendaed discussion for the next meeting for the commission to discuss an open floor for the types of things that matter to you as commissioners, the things that you think the commission should care about. And then if there's a desire to have an even more guided approach with like a sentencing guideline analogy, then we could appoint a subcommittee. I could just build something and see what you think of it. Whatever approach the commission wants to take. But I think that in general, more information is good, and more consistency, creating more guidance is generally beneficial, I think. So that'd be where I sit on it. I appreciate.
Could we invite public comment as well?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of lobbyists who have opinions on what should be considered at different times.
If they can remember to submit the public comment on time.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds like an excellent idea, Mark. And so for our June 28th meeting in 5 weeks, perhaps we will include that then on the agenda item. And we can think in the interim about maybe what we want to contribute to that conversation. I think that would be helpful.
And I'll solicit public comment through Twitter at least, and maybe I'll try to ask some of our desks to email some people who are like longtime lobbyists, longtime treasurers, longtime candidates, and see if there's anything that they want to communicate to the commission on this issue as well.
Great. Any other matters any commissioners wish to discuss before we adjourn today's meeting?
So, something from my original meeting was also asking about if we kept statistics as to how it breaks down by violation, not just as a total number, but by locality, as far as like, is it a local election? Is it a state election? That kind of thing. Is there anything that's in place that makes that a readily available analysis?
Not currently, but we can put something together. Are you asking about waivers or assessments, or both, really?
I'm really thinking on the educational side. And if we discover that for whatever reason, Pittsburgh, Kansas is the hotbed of all violations, then maybe we should focus more, down and have something down at Chicken Mary's or something of that nature. And if it's some big problem with regard to city elections, then we would know to better focus in on the cities.
Yep, I think that's a great point. Though I will indicate, are you taking a stance in the chicken war in Pittsburgh?
I might be.
That's pretty dangerous.
Are you saying we should be the Chicken Mary's?
I'm not elected down there.
Yeah, great. I'll see what I can put together. So we can try to. I'll look at maybe the more recent time period, maybe the last year or so, and see what we can pull together and try to parse the data in some way that's meaningful.
Mark, is this the kind of information that appears in the commissioners or the commission's annual report? The amount of penalties assessed in the course of a year?
Yeah, there's no nuance to it.
Okay.
It's broken down by, it's really just campaign finance, lobbyist, and SSI civil penalties. We don't really break it down too much further, though we have in the past been requested in different times. We've given certain breakdowns as it applies. But it's been a while since we've had a request like that. I think that it's a good idea to see if there's a particular category. I have some suspicions where I think the bigger problems are, but it'll be interesting to see if the numbers bear that out.
Yeah. Any other matters to discuss?
This is Patty. I have a question. Given the fact that some legislation was passed during the recent session that may or may not affect the commission and our role on the commission, are we going to receive some maybe just brief update on what the changes are and what impact that may or may not have.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to put something together. I can send it out or put it in the meeting documents as a director's report for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, if there's nothing else to discuss today, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Make that. motion.
Thank you, Kyle. Do I have a second?
Second, Patty.
Thank you, Patty. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the motion to adjourn signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Thank you, commissioners and staff, for your attendance today. It's greatly appreciated. We'll see everyone again in 5 weeks on June 28th.
Thanks,
Is this
everyone. It's
Serena?
great seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Is this Serena? Yeah, our commission